A handful of table salt dropped into a bucket of icy pulls the temperature below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. No electricity, no compressor, and no moving parts. For centuries, American homesteaders used this reaction to turn well water ice cold in 4 minutes for 5 cents a day. The physics still works. The industry needs you to forget it did. And by the end of this video, you will discover why this $5 trick was erased. Here is what happens when salt meets ice. Sodium chloride disrupts the crystal structure of frozen water. It breaks the hydrogen bonds holding the ice together. That bond breaking is not a passive event. It pulls heat energy out of everything around it. The surrounding air, the bucket, the water sitting next to it. Physicists call this an endothermic dissolution reaction. The rest of us call it cold. Brutal, measurable, repeatable cold. At the ideal ratio of 1 part salt to 3 parts crushed ice by weight, the mixture reaches what chemists call the eutectic point. For sodium chloride and water, that temperature is minus 21.1 degrees Celsius. That is minus 6 degrees Fahrenheit. Colder than your kitchen freezer, published and confirmed in the Journal of Chemical Education, documented in the CRC Handbook of Chemistry and Physics. This is not folk wisdom. This is thermodynamics with a receipt. Now here's the number that puts it in perspective. Your refrigerator compressor draws roughly 1,200 watts to achieve a similar temperature drop inside an insulated box. This reaction achieves it with a handful of salt and a bucket of ice. No wiring, no coolant, no utility bill. The energy comes from the phase change itself. The salt forces the ice to melt faster than it naturally would, and that accelerated melting absorbs heat from anything nearby, including a pipe full of well water. That is exactly how American homesteaders used it. Picture a wooden tub on a farmhouse porch in eastern Tennessee around 1910, packed with crushed ice from the winter pond, layered with rock salt from the feed store, a coil of copper tubing wound tight and submerged in that slurry, well water pumped by hand through one end of the coil. At the other end, the water comes out between 34 and 38 degrees Fahrenheit in under 4 minutes. Regardless of what temperature it started at, this was not a novelty trick. The United States Department of Agriculture published Farmer's Bulletin number 1374 in 1924. The title was Cooling Milk and Cream on the Farm. It described salt and ice immersion cooling as standard agricultural practice across the American South and Midwest. The University of Wisconsin Agricultural Extension documented the performance in 1918. Well water entering at 68 degrees Fahrenheit exited a salt and ice coil at 34 degrees in 3.5 minutes. The cost per day in $1920 was 5 to 8 cents. Adjusted for inflation, that is roughly $1.50 today. But here is what most people never learn. Americans did not invent this, they inherited it. And the people who perfected it did so thousands of years earlier on the other side of the world. In the courts of Mughal India during the 1500s, Emperor Akbar's engineers used a chemical called potassium nitrate. You know it as saltpeter. When dissolved in water, potassium nitrate absorbs 34.89 kilojoules per mole. That is nearly 10 times the heat absorption of table salt. Mughal servants packed clay vessels of drinking water inside containers filled with saltpeter and ice. They rotated the vessels by hand until the water inside chilled to near freezing in the desert in summer using nothing but a mineral and a bucket. The court historian Abu el-Fazl documented this in the Ain-e-Akbari in 1595. Chilled water was a symbol of imperial power. The same mineral that cooled the emperor's throat also fueled his cannons. Saltpeter was the basis of gunpowder. The Mughal state controlled both the weapons grade and the cooling grade supply from mines in Bengal and Bihar. One mineral, 2 empires of control. And here is the part that should bother you. Ammonium nitrate, or urea, is the active ingredient in virtually every instant cold pack sold in pharmacies today. The same chemistry a Mughal emperor used to chill his drinking water for fractions of a penny now costs you $3 per single-use pack, repackaged, disposable, profitable. Travel further back. During the Tang Dynasty in China between 618 and 907 AD, artisans in Hangzhou and Kaifeng discovered that dissolving large quantities of saltpeter in water could freeze the water itself. This is the earliest documented manufacture of ice from a chemical reaction, not harvested from mountains, not carved from frozen rivers, made from scratch in a workshop using a mineral and a clay pot. Joseph Needham confirmed it in Science and Civilization in China. By the Song Dynasty, frozen desserts and iced drinks were sold at street markets. 700 years before a Boston businessman shipped his first block of pond ice, the Chinese were making ice from chemistry and selling it on the street. The knowledge moved west. In 1550, a Spanish physician named Blas Villafranca, working in Rome, published the first European description of using saltpeter to chill wine and water. The text was called Methodus Refrigerandi. Within 70 years, the technique had spread across Italian courts and English country estates. In 1665, Robert Boyle published New Experiments and Observations Touching Cold. He measured the temperature of salt and ice mixtures with precision instruments and recorded readings below any natural temperature ever documented in England. In 1626, Sir Francis Bacon died of pneumonia contracted while stuffing a chicken with snow and salt on a freezing London road. He was testing whether the same endothermic reaction that chilled water could preserve meat. It could. It killed him anyway. But the principle was proven. By 1700, salt and ice cooling was standard practice in wealthy European households. Your great-great-grandmother did not need a textbook for this. She packed her butter crock in salt and ice every summer morning on a farm in Virginia or Ohio or Kentucky. She knew the ratio by feel. 3 scoops of ice, 1 scoop of salt. Stir it once and walk away. So if a Mughal emperor and a Chinese street vendor and an Italian physician and an Appalachian farm wife all knew this chemistry worked, then who decided you should not? In 1806, a young businessman named Frederick Tudor of Boston loaded a brig with blocks of frozen pond water and sailed for the Caribbean. People laughed. They stopped laughing when he built a monopoly. By the 1850s, the Ice King controlled an industry worth $220 million, adjusted for inflation. His business model was elegant and ruthless. Convince Americans to stop cooling things themselves and start buying cooling as a service. Tudor's own diary entries describe his strategy. Make commercial ice so cheap and so available that traditional salt and ice cooling would appear as drudgery. His agents lobbied public health boards to frame homemade cooling as unsanitary. There was no evidence of contamination from the endothermic reaction, but the narrative stuck. By 1880, the American natural ice industry harvested 25 million tons per year and employed 90,000 workers. The irony is that Tudor's pond ice was the unsanitary product, harvested downstream from factories and sewage outfalls. But the man who sold dirty ice convinced a nation that clean chemistry was the danger. Then the machines arrived. In 1834, Jacob Perkins patented the first vapor compression refrigerator. By the 1920s, General Electric, Frigidaire, and Kelvinator were spending millions on advertising. A 1927 Frigidaire campaign asked American housewives why they would risk their family's health with melting ice when science offered a better way. No evidence was cited for the health risk, none was needed. The word science did the work. In 1936, the Rural Electrification Administration began wiring rural America. Federal loans were tied to appliance purchases, specifically electric refrigerators. Salt and ice cooling required no electricity. It was incompatible with the business model of electrification itself. Every farm wife who kept cooling her well water with a 5-cent bucket of salt and ice was a customer the utilities could not bill. By 1950, home economics curricula in 48 states had removed all references to salt and ice cooling and brine immersion and springhouse techniques. The USDA farmers' bulletins that described these methods were quietly discontinued. The knowledge was not disproven, it was defunded. An entire generation of women who had learned the salt ratio from their mothers graduated from high school believing a refrigerator was the only option. Today, the average American household spends $450 per year on refrigeration electricity alone. That is Energy Information Administration data from 2023. The global refrigeration market is projected to reach $211 billion by 2027. The chemical refrigerants used in modern systems have a global warming potential 1,000 to 4,000 times that of carbon dioxide, 5 cents of salt, a bucket of winter ice. And the thermodynamics have not changed in 300 years. What changed was who profits. So what would it actually take to build this yourself? The setup is almost insultingly simple. You need an insulated container. A styrofoam cooler from any hardware store works. $12. You need copper tubing, 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch outer diameter, 20 to 50 feet coiled tight. You can find used copper coil at any scrapyard for $15 to $25. You need crushed ice, and you need rock salt. A 25-pound bag of rock salt costs $4 to $6 at any farm supply store. Pack the cooler with crushed ice. Crushed performs better than block because the greater surface area accelerates the endothermic reaction. Layer in the salt at a ratio of 1 part salt to 3 parts ice by weight. Submerge the copper coil. Connect one end to your well pump outlet or a gravity-fed line. Let the water flow through at roughly 1/2 gallon per minute. At the other end of the coil, you will measure water between 34 and 38 degrees. The copper does the work. Its thermal conductivity is 401 watts per meter Kelvin. That is why plumbers have used it for centuries. It transfers heat faster than almost any material you can buy. Now here's what most videos will not tell you. If you are in Phoenix and your idea of ice is a $4 bag from a gas station, this becomes a supplemental trick, not a replacement system. The economics depend on access to cheap or free ice. Historically, farm families cut pond ice in January and stored it in sawdust-insulated ice houses that kept ice solid through September. The USDA documented this in Farmer's Bulletin 1078, published in 1919. If you have a chest freezer, you can produce 20 pounds of ice per day using roughly 1.5 kilowatt hours. That is about 20 cents of electricity. Add 10 cents of salt. You are cooling all your drinking water for 30 cents a day. For off-grid applications, a 100-watt solar panel powering a 12-volt chest freezer produces enough ice to run this system indefinitely. Total setup cost under $400. No grid connection required. During hurricanes and ice storms and heat waves, when the grid fails and conventional refrigeration dies, this setup runs on stored ice and shelf-stable salt. Both last forever. Neither sends a bill. A few honest warnings. Salt brine will corrode galvanized steel over time. Use stainless steel or food-grade plastic containers for anything long-term. Spent brine is salt water. Do not pour it on your garden. Dilute it and dispose in a gravel drain away from any plants. And this system cools drinking water and cooking water beautifully. It does not replace whole house air conditioning. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Know what it does, know what it does not. That is the difference between a builder and a salesman. If you want to go further, pair this with an earth tube cooling system. The earth tube delivers air at 55 degrees from below your frost line. The salt and ice coil drops your well water to 35 degrees. Two forgotten systems combined replicate a modern refrigerator and a cooled air supply for under $50 in materials total. The earth does half the work, the salt does the rest. The electric company does nothing because you do not need them. They did not disprove the physics. They stopped teaching it. A handful of salt, a bucket of ice, it needs nothing else.